Hey guys, Paul here. I'm back to talk about some more Yu-Gi-Oh stuff over here. Unedited, uncut. Today I want to talk about the limited list and the weird problem, sort of, that I see with it at times. This comes up a lot. This will get into the Max C argument that everybody loves. Should Max C be banned or be at 3 or be at 1 or whatever? So let's just dive right in with what the Yu-Gi-Oh! Limited list is, which is, there's a forbidden list, forbidden and limited list. Some cards are forbidden, which means you can use 0 copies in your deck. You cannot play this at all, like at least if you're playing in a tournament. And then there's cards that are limited, which means you can use 1 copy. And then there's the cards that are semi-limited, which means you can use 2. And if it's just unlimited, you can use up to 3 copies in your deck. It seems elementary, but I'm just getting it out of the way now, so nobody can, I don't know, if you have no clue what I'm talking about now, you do. So, the limited list is an interesting one to me. Cards can end up on the limited list for a lot of reasons, and there are many different types of cards that get limited. Sometimes there are the types of cards that are like consistency related things that search your deck. Terraforming, reinforcement of the army, cards where maybe they have a large pool of things that they search, or the things that they search are really strong, so they limited them so that they kind of, are reduced in consistency. So that's one thing. And then there's also like just powerful kind of removal effects type cards. That's, I guess, where you end up with like your Raigekis or your Harpy Feather Dusters. Those types of cards are, obviously, if those were at 3 and they showed up all the time, it might feel like the game is too volatile and, things just get destroyed all the time. Why even put anything on the field? Then there's like, cards that are like extenders and combos. So maybe they don't want this extender to exist, so it cuts out a loop, or it maybe makes something a little bit less consistent. But recently, I've found that there are some cards on the limited list. There's like 4 that I'm going to go over, but I might include more as I think of them, that kind of feel like when they're on the limited list, they actually are sackier, or like, I guess, more luck inducing than when they're at 3 or if they were just banned. So we'll start with Max C, which isn't one of the 4 cards. It's just a good primary example. So everybody has different opinions on Max C, whether or not it should be legal, whether or not it would save this game or send this game straight to hell. But the point is, it's banned right now. It was at 3 at a time. Cool, great. You could have run 3 Max C. Over time, that became the expectation and the staples that you should probably be running 3 Max C as Yu-Gi-Oh! Became more special summon based. It, punishes your opponent for special summoning, or rather rewards you as your opponent chooses to special summon, and you'll get lots of cards. And it can be extremely polarizing, because if your opponent wants to do their combo, then they'll be drawing you a bazillion cards and you'll just beat them next turn. Or it will freeze their combo because they don't want to give you all the cards, because card economy is literally everything in this game sometimes. So, this card for a while it was at 2 for a while, it was at 1 for a while, it eventually just got banned. The reason why people didn't like Max C at 1 was because at 1, it wouldn't show up in every game. But its effect and its effectiveness did not change. When you saw Max C, you got the wild polarizing benefits that I was just talking about, where it can freeze an entire turn or just, get you a ungodly amount of cards for free. If you see it, that's how it is. Now, it would be staple to run a single copy. It would be unwise to not be running a single copy. Every deck would run a single copy. But in any given game, maybe one person sees Max C, maybe the other person doesn't. That kind of doesn't feel fair. Or maybe nobody sees it, in which case, whatever. But the point is, when you see Max C, it's still going to be just as impactful. You'll just see it less. But some players might see that as a bit unfair, because it turns it into more of a card that's luck related. Like, it's just luck if you draw your single Max C or not. If you draw it, then you get this great benefit. If you don't, you don't. Do you see where the problem comes in with this? It's one of those things where I think that's why people say they'd rather have Max C at 3, where it can be accounted for. If everybody can run 3 Max C, then you can just simply expect that Max C will be played, and you can expect that it will show up in many games, and kind of plan around that. But when it's at 1, it feels like it's just luck, and it's just sacky. When it's at 0, well, it's at 0. So there are other cards that I feel, to lesser extents than Max C, but similarly suffer the same thing or have the same quality. For instance, a really good one is Dino Wrestler Pankratops. This card was at 3 for a long time. It was a great card for going second, a good card for breaking boards. You could usually bait out multiple negations by using it. It had, a free special summon, and you can attack with it, and use effect to pop something, and they'd have to negate, the whole thing. This made for a really good going second card, and Konami eventually limited it. People still run the card, but now I would argue that if you're running it and you see it, it's still just as effective. It just shows up less. But maybe that's a little bit sacky, isn't it? Because if I'm anticipating, Dino Wrestler Pankratops, I can't really expect that it'll show up very often. Not often enough to plan my whole deck or strategy around countering it. But if they see it, Okay, next card. Mind Control. This is another card that recently went to 1. I say recently, maybe like a year or two now. But Mind Control is a card that can be seen as quite sacky. I mean, it can just take really almost any problematic monster, and then it could lead to you getting OTK'd. It's a great board breaker. It forces a negation. All these good things. When it was at 2 or at 3, Mind Control, it's something that you can account for. When it's at 1, you can't really be sure if your opponent's playing it, or if they'll see it if they're playing it. But when it shows up, it's still strong. Another card like that is Red Reboot. And then, there's many examples I could make. So basically, these cards, some people feel as though when these cards are at 1, they actually can feel more unbalanced than when they're at 3, because at 3 you can prepare, but at 1 you can't, but it can still show up and ruin your day. The biggest recent addition to the ban list, and the one that I think I hear the most flack about from players right now, is Called by the Grave. So this is a card that was at 3. It's effectively seen as the anti-hand trap card. It can be used for many other things, and I definitely implore you to look into them. I think it's a very nicely designed card for the most part. But when it went to 1, people were kind of upset. It effectively means that the card isn't necessarily worth running because you can't expect to see it, but then if you do see it, it will stop a key hand trap, a draw and lock bird, anything, like Dimension Shifter, all these different cards, which right now that's highly impactful since we play a game where hand traps are about stopping turns right now, like Lancia, Shifter, Droll. But even then, just stopping Ash Blossom is a big deal, but it kind of gets into sacky territory, where it might just be better off at 0 and not a factor at all, or at 3 where you can anticipate it, but not at 1. So, the counter arguments to this, because this isn't just a video where I simply say one thing and force you to believe it, right? Okay, the counter argument is, well, that's just how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. It's a card game. There's going to be RNG. There's going to be luck. And I totally understand this. I do think that, your opponent's going to see good cards sometimes they put in their deck, and that will cause you to lose, and that's just part of the game. It's a trading card game. Live with it. Games don't always go your way. You'll brick sometimes. Your opponent will brick sometimes. Whatever. I guess the main thing is just that for many players, they feel that skill is kind of more about, preparation and, rational decision making. But if it's a card that you can't necessarily anticipate, it gets trickier. So I'm very mixed on this. I'm not saying that I'm completely on one side of the camp or the other. There's even a card I just remembered that I think could enter this territory. There's a few. I mean, obviously, people talk about Dark Ruler No More. That's a really big one. Because that can feel sacky if you're a combo player, you make a big board, and your opponent draws Dark Ruler No More, whatever. So that could be one where if Konami limited it, because I see some people say oh, limit this card, but if they limited it, it might just feel even more frustrating when you lose to it, because now it just feels like it was strictly luck. Maybe it already feels that way. I don't know. It's a different argument for a different day. But the one I was going to say is Mystic Mine. This is a card that plenty of people hate and want to see banned, but some people say, oh, well, just limit it. Well, if you limited it, maybe that'd be fine and then it wouldn't show up as much, but it still means when it shows up, it's just as problematic. I don't know. Where do you go with that? Because I think that if Mystic Mine was at 1 and it's supposed to be a balancing mechanism, I'd still be just as frustrated when it gets played against me. Or if you hate Mystic Mine, you'd be just as frustrated when it gets played against you. You could say maybe it makes it a little less consistent, but is that solving the problem? I don't really know. So, That's basically my thoughts on this. This is a multifaceted thing. All I'm doing is positing an opinion or like a stance out there. Um, I don't know exactly where I land. I mean, I guess I kind of don't like the idea of cards being limited. Like, I guess I don't like it very much, would be where I am on it. But I see the merits in it for some cards. So I want to hear from you guys and know what you think about this dilemma, or do you think it's even a dilemma at all? Do you think it's all being used properly? Heck, we could even make a video, a separate one, about the semi-limited list and what the applications of that are, because right now it's barely used. I mean, it's literally the malicious list. So, yeah. Let me know, what do you guys think about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Limited list? Do you think that this is a problem? Do you think it's not? Where do you land on the issue? Yeah, I've gone on long enough. That's all I have to say. See you guys in the next one. Pass turn.